My bad on that. Let's get into it. Ignore the intro. We start with James Madison and Louisville. The breakdown here is, can James Madison build off of their win last week? If they can, I think they have a good chance at winning this game and upsetting Louisville. For Louisville, can they build off of last week also, where they won against Eastern Kentucky? If they can, then I think they can win this game. Next, Northwestern and Western Illinois. Okay, Northwestern looked awful last week. Now, can they turn it around and win this week? If they can, and their offense plays better than it did last week, there shouldn't be any issues. But if they can't, then that's going to be a problem. Next, Northern Illinois and Maryland. Both these teams won last week. Maryland won very convincingly, 31-0. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for the intro. I meant to unmute my microphone, so please forgive me. I will be cutting that out when I edit the video. But I think for Maryland, I liked what I saw from Malik Washington last week, the quarterback. And if he can play mistake-free football again like he did this week, like he did last week, I can see Maryland going to 2-0. But if he has turnover problems, turns the ball over, has a couple interceptions, and is not mistake-free, Maryland will probably lose. Boise State and Eastern Washington, I'm going to go off on a limb here and say Eastern Washington, I would not show up because Boise State is not going to be in a pleasant mood. They got absolutely boat raced by South Florida last week. And if you want to see the replay, I did a play-by-play of the game last week between Boise State and South Florida. Go back and watch. But Boise State basically for Boise State, what it is they need to be smarter on offense. Don't get one-dimensional. Don't get one-dimensional like you did against USF. If you can have the big plays, I tell you a couple of points I took away from the game last week for Boise State. Their running game is going to be good. Malik Sherrod and Cyrus Gaines, both those guys are good. Maddox Matson, I think he's going to be fine. UCF and North Carolina A&T. UCF is pretty good. And I would just go out on a limb and say UCF is probably going to start the year 2-0. Texas and San Jose State, the same thing I said about Eastern Washington. Texas, San Jose State, I would not show up for this game. You are going to get beat out of the building. And I don't think 36.5 is too high because Texas is not going to be pleased about what happened last week against Ohio State. And I would just say be wary. Penn State, 41.5. That's a little too high, but I would take Penn State to cover. Duke and Illinois. To me, this is one of the big games this week. It is at noon on ESPN Saturday. And I think everybody's kind of overranking Illinois right now. But if Illinois can play mistake-free football like they did week 1, I think Illinois wins this game very easily. Very easily. Baylor SMU. So now the line's gone down to 3. It moved. I had it at 4.5 on our chart, which you'll see later, and then I moved it down to make it more accommodating with what they're going off of right now. I think for both teams, Baylor needs to play a better brand of football compared to last week. If they play a better brand of football this week, they will win. If they don't, they will be 0-2 at the end of the game. Indiana, Kennesaw State, not much to see here. Kennesaw State might be bad again this year. They only scored 10 points against. No, they scored 9 points in their week 1 game. And Indiana scored a whole bunch. Now, this is one of the big games in week 2. Iowa State in Ames. And I think for Iowa to pull the upset here, which they've been notorious for doing, they need to play mistake-free football. And they actually scored over 30 points in week 1, which is a surprise. I did not expect that at all. Kent State and Texas Tech. Again, Texas Tech just needs to score. Score, and score some more. I could see Northwestern State beating Minnesota. North Carolina State and Virginia. Briefly talk about this one because this is on our chart. But Virginia looked a lot better than North Carolina State did in week 1. North Carolina State almost blew a 24-0 lead and lost. I can see the same thing happening this week if North Carolina State plays ugly again this week. I think they lose. Syracuse and UConn. Because Pitt and I think I'm going to say one thing about the Pitt Central Michigan game. I think Pitt might be looking ahead to next week in West Virginia. And if they are, that's going to be a trap game. UConn and Syracuse. This game is also on our chart. And the one thing I'm going to say is I think there's going to be a lot of scoring. Florida State, East Texas A&M, simple. Florida State looked good last week, and I was going to put Thomas Castellanos as my player of the week, but I picked somebody else. Liberty, Jacksonville State. This game, this is also on our chart. I'm not going to tell you who my pick is, but I think if Liberty can win this game, for Liberty to win this game, they need to be mistake-free on offense. And on defense, they need to pressure the quarterback. Texas A&M and Utah State, easy. Texas A&M, just keep doing what you're doing. You played really good last week. If you can continue to play the way you played last week, Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver are going to have big games. Western Carolina and Wake Forest. Wake Forest eked out a win against Kennesaw State 10-9 last week. Ugly game. I think I would hope Wake Forest can score more points against Western Carolina. But if they can't, watch out for an upset. Also at 2 o'clock, Temple and Howard. Temple looked okay in their first game of the year. Well, I would say better than okay. E.J. Warner had 6 TDs in the first game of the season. Is he going to do that again? Temple might be a sneaky team in the AAC. Yeah. The one thing I'm going to say about Grambling State, Ohio State is I liked what I saw from Ohio State's defense last week, but we need to see more offensively. And I think Ohio State's going to unleash their full offense this week. They couldn't against Texas because Texas has a really good defense. Clemson and Troy. Troy, I would not even get off the bus in Clemson in South Carolina. I would stay on that bus and forfeit. Clemson is going to run up the score. Same with Georgia. I think they run up the score on Austin Peay. And unfortunately, I know I say to never pick against Mike Gundy, but this might be one of the times you have to. Because I think Oregon is going to bludgeon Oklahoma State. Kentucky and Ole Miss. The only way Kentucky in that line is 10.5. Ooh, okay. My dog of the week, Ole Miss. Kentucky plus 10.5. That's a bonus upset pick. That is not on the chart anywhere. I don't think it is. Tennessee, East Tennessee State. I was wrong about Joey Aguilar. I will eliminate it right now. Kansas, Missouri. Rivalry game. Can Missouri go to one of these teams is Kansas is either going to pick up its third win or Missouri picks up its second and hands Kansas its first loss of the year. So we see Miami of Ohio, Rutgers. Here's my joke about Rutgers. It's like a hard candy. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. Breakdown here is that Rutgers almost lost to Ohio last week, and if Rutgers pulls the same stuff against Miami of Ohio, they might lose. Miami of Ohio, I still like them to win the MAC, even though they scored no points in week 1. I still like them to win the MAC. Fresno State, Boise, Oregon State, simple. Can Fresno State go to 2-1? Can Oregon State get to 1-1? There's really no other. I'm looking for the game at night. UAB. South Florida, Florida. Full breakdown and preview in a few minutes at the end of the show. Okay? I'm trying to find Michigan and Oklahoma. That's the other big game this week. Well, first of all, let's talk about the debacle that is Bill Belichick in North Carolina. North Carolina absolutely laid an egg on Monday against TCU. And I think kind of everybody expected that. 70 new players from North Carolina. How are they going to bounce back as they go to Jerry Richardson Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina, to play the University of Charlotte? I think for North Carolina, prayers up to their starting quarterback, Gio Lopez, who got hurt. Unfortunately, he is in a segment later on in the show. But I think for North Carolina, Max Johnson is probably going to be starting. And I feel like the offense moves a little more efficiently with Max Johnson than it does Gio Lopez. Don't get me wrong. Gio Lopez is a good quarterback. But I think North Carolina scores a lot of points. one of those two teams is going to get their first win. And the big game, 7:30, which I will be doing a play-by-play for, Michigan, Oklahoma. The spread is now down to -5.5 in favor of Oklahoma. I would take Oklahoma in the points, and here is the reasoning why I don't trust Bryce Underwood right now. He looked good at his first start, but it was against a half-decent caliber New Mexico team. If he play now, when I come back on the show Monday and we recap the SEC, the Big 10 and the Big 12 at 11 o'clock in the morning, and then 10 o'clock at night, the SEC, my stance may have changed. And I will explain how I'm doing this podcast going forward at the end. So stick around to hear that. Now we get to my player of the week in college football. A new segment I'm doing, my player of the week and my dud of the week. So my player of the week is Georgia quarterback Gunnar Stockton, who you heard me on this show and my other college football show I do. All offseason, I said, Georgia's in trouble. I don't really trust Gunnar Stockton. Well, in week 1, Gunnar Stockton went for 150 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 10 carries, 73 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Now, this is a start for Gunnar Stockton to get on my good side. And when I say good side, I mean not... What I mean is basically that he's coming on, he's changed. My perspective is slowly changing on him. And I think if I keep seeing Gunnar Stockton put up these kind of numbers, that slowly but surely, I think it's possible that my whole narrative could change on Gunnar Stockton. And now, unfortunately, we get to my dud of the week. And my dud of the week goes to North Carolina, and I understand he got hurt, so there's nothing against him there. But it goes to North Carolina quarterback Gio Lopez. And Mr. Lopez went 4 for 10 with an interception before he got hurt. And prayers up to him because it looked like a gruesome injury. And like I said when I was previewing and breaking down the games, I still think North Carolina is in good hands with Max Johnson. However, if Gio Lopez does end up coming back at some point this year, easily could see Gio Lopez leading North Carolina not to the ACC title game, but to a really good bowl game. And now we get to everybody's favorite part, the charts. MVP chart and college football picks chart. We start with the MVP chart, and we start with our locks this week. Our first one is BYU. This is the highest one we have for week number 2. BYU at 94% to beat Stanford. Stanford in week 1 and week 0 was horrendous. They lost both games. They lost to Hawaii in week 0, and they lost to Stanford. They lost to Arizona in week 1. And I don't see an avenue where I just don't see anywhere where we could have Stanford be on the opposite side of this and say, Stanford's got a 50% chance to win. Absolutely not. My second highest chance to our second lock this week is Louisville Louisville at 75.5% to beat James Madison. Now, this is kind of low because I think James Madison's going to stick. I think everybody thinks James Madison's going to stick around, including me. And I could see James Madison sticking around till probably the third or fourth quarter. And maybe James Madison pulls off the upset. Like I said in the video earlier this week on Monday when we did our recap of the chart, good week one. We looked a bit on it, build on it in week number 2. So that is the second one. The third lock of the week is West Virginia 74% to beat Ohio. Now, I think West Virginia is a lot better than Rutgers, even with all the new people they bring in. I think West Virginia can beat Ohio and beat them by at least 2 touchdowns. And the last one is Virginia Tech. Sorry for the voice crack. Virginia Tech at 73% to beat Vanderbilt. And I think Virginia Tech's going to be ticked off because they opened the season with a loss to South Carolina. And I can see Virginia Tech coming out and beating Vanderbilt. Our picks against the spread for the MVPs, we've got Baylor and SMU. We've got Baylor plus 2.5. I took it at we put it up here at plus 2.5. I know it's gone up to 3.5, but I feel like taking it at 2.5 because I feel like Baylor's going to cover here. I'm not saying they're going to win. I just think they cover the spread, and that's how it goes. Next, we've got Kansas plus 6.5 to cover against Missouri. I'm not impressed with Bo Pavila yet. So give me Kansas to cover plus 6.5. Duke is our next one. Duke plus 3 to cover against Illinois. I think that's kind of simple. And Illinois didn't really surprise me. It didn't really push the needle in week 1. So that's why I think we should take Duke plus the 3 to cover. And the last one, this is my ride or die. One of my ride or dies. As you know, the other one's Ohio State, but they're obviously not on the chart this week. It is South Florida plus 17.5 to cover against the Florida Gators. And I believe that this one, I believe USF can cover here. They covered last week against Boise State. I know it's a step up and they're playing the Gators, but I think they can cover against Florida. Now we get to our money line. And we've got Oklahoma minus 200 on the money line versus Michigan. And I'm also, as you see at the bottom in the game picks, I have Oklahoma in there too against Michigan. But this is a big game, and as I said earlier, I'm doing play-by-play for it on YouTube Saturday night. I think Oklahoma's going to win. I don't know by how much. Then you've got Ole Miss minus 375 on the money line versus Kentucky. I know I told you to take Kentucky earlier in the points. If you don't want to do that, go ahead and take Ole Miss money line to beat Kentucky. Our next one is Virginia plus 115 on the money line versus North Carolina State. And I briefly talked about it earlier on how I kind of trust Virginia more than I do North Carolina State. If I trusted North Carolina State, you would see Virginia on the other side of this money line. But I don't trust North Carolina State. I don't trust CJ Bailey. Iowa plus 140 on the money line versus Iowa State. Rivalry game. We know everything gets intensified in a rivalry game. And that's why I believe that Iowa we should take Iowa on the money line here at plus 140. And then our game picks. Liberty, Jacksonville State. We're taking Liberty. Oregon State, Fresno State. We're taking Oregon State. South Florida, Florida. Originally, we were going to take Florida, but I think we're going to go with South Florida. And Michigan, Oklahoma, we're going to take Oklahoma. And now we get to the CFB chart. The college football picks chart, and our picks, the picks against the spread. First one, UConn plus 6.5 to cover against Syracuse. I think this is kind of self-explanatory. I'm pretty sure UConn's going to cover here. And UConn did cover a lot last year. They did cover in week 1. I think they're going to cover again in week 2. Miami of Ohio plus 14 to cover against Rutgers. Miami of Ohio is 1-0 against the spread this year. And we took them in week 1 on the money line, though, and lost. But I'm willing to go back. I think we are all willing to go back and take Miami of Ohio again, this time to cover, because they did cover in week 1. I think they cover in week 2, and I think there's an outside chance that they actually beat Rutgers, because I don't think Rutgers is actually as good as people want to say they are. Then we got Fresno State plus 3.5 to cover against, plus 3 to cover against Oregon State. Now, I know we took Oregon State to win, but we're taking Fresno State to cover. And then our last pick against the spread is Western Kentucky plus 7.5 to cover against Toledo. I think we take Western Kentucky plus the 7.5 to cover an outright win. Because I don't think Toledo's that good. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Hold up. Yeah, I know you're seeing that on stream, but this is supposed to say over slash. So, over under picks here, and then we'll get over to the game picks. Over under picks. We've got Baylor versus SMU. The total is 65.5. And I like taking the over 65.5 points. I think both of these teams are going to score and score a lot. And I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. And I just think there's going to be a lot of scoring. Kansas and Missouri. This is another one where I think there's going to be a lot of scoring in this game. The total is 49.5. Give me the over. Give me over 49.5 points. And I like both quarterbacks. I do like Bo Pabula, and I really like Jalen Daniels. And it looked like Jalen Daniels was back to his old self last week. Northern Illinois and Maryland. The total is 47.5. I think we need to take the under here. I don't think both of these teams can make it to that total. That's give or take 30 points each. Yes, I know Maryland shut out FAU last week 31-0. But I don't think they can score that many points against Northern Illinois. And then the last one, Middle Tennessee and Wisconsin. The total is 46.5. Give me under 46.5 between under 46.5 points between Middle Tennessee and Wisconsin. I don't think there's going to be a lot of scoring. Now our game picks. First one, Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech. We're taking Virginia Tech. Michigan State, Boston College, Michigan State. Sam Houston, Hawaii gave us Hawaii, and UNLV, UCLA. UNLV. And now we get to my preview of the Gators and the South Florida Bulls. USF's coming off a win, huge win against Boise State last week, 34-7. And if USF can play the same way they played last week against Boise State, I think they win. But here's my keys to the game for USF. First one is the most important one. Use the QB run game. You saw how good it was last week against Boise State. I think if you use the run game of the quarterback again this week, you will beat the Gators. 2, limit, and this is defense, and they did a really good job against Boise State. Limit big plays. If you can limit the big plays, I don't see a way you don't beat Florida. If you limit the big plays, I mean plays at 10 plus yards, if you can limit those big plays, you will win. If you can't, you lose. And limit penalties. USF did have some dumb penalties last week. If they can avoid that, I think they beat Florida. And my pick here is South Florida to beat the Gators. And ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know, the Blitz and Glory podcast is also, it's not only the home for college football content, it's also the home for NFL content as well. This will be the NFL and college football Blitz and Glory podcast. For example, we have at 3:45 our NFL predictions and NFL MVP chart coming out live at 3:45. We also have merch and memberships. Please either purchase a membership or buy some merch. But that will wrap up today's episode. I will see everybody back here at 3:45. Have a wonderful day.